the 6th of November, 2011, I was fired from my dream job. Sometimes it takes getting fired from your dream job to create a personal epiphany. And my personal epiphany was around a skill that I lacked. And that skill was emotional intelligence. Now, it might help you to understand why I had trouble with my emotional intelligence when I tell you that I'm half German. But in all seriousness, I grew up as a very left brain-centered person. And I was taught that to emphasize my rationality, my scientific way of thinking, I should push away my emotions. And so I developed this idea that somehow to become more rational, to become more logical, I have to abandon my emotions. And I think that's complete. I once said over it, but it's not true. Our emotions and our logic can help us become better together. And I'm going to tell you a story about how I really discovered about emotional intelligence. But before I do that, I need to explain what my understanding of emotional intelligence is. And that is that emotional intelligence is a skill that involves the ability to read one's own and others' emotions accurately and to put that information to good use. That's it. Simple. Nothing else. Emotional intelligence is just a skill. We can learn it. It is the ability to read our own and others' emotions accurately and to put that information to good use. So, on the 6th of November, 2011, I was fired from my dream job. 10 months earlier, in January 2011, I landed my dream job. I was elected president of an organization called ISAC New Zealand. And this was my dream job because I got to work full-time for an organization that developed young leaders. This is my passion. ISAC is the largest organization in the world that's run entirely by young people. Every single position in the organization is held by a young person under the age of 30 for just 12-month terms. And I discovered this organization while I was studying at the University of Auckland in New Zealand in 2006. And over the next 5 years, I'm just going to hold it. Over the next 5 years, I'm going to start back. Over the next 5 years, I attended leadership conferences, I led teams of people, and I discovered an ability to communicate and inspire people towards a common cause. And so in 2010, when I finished my studies, I made a decision to run for a full-time role with the organization, working as the national president of Levent. So, okay. Thank you. Is that? Whoa. Okay, mic problems. Oh wow, it's completely different. So I made a decision to run for this position as national president. And so I went and I researched what it involved. I studied all the major stakeholders. And I made some ambitious plans for the changes I would undertake if elected. And on the day of the elections, I went to Wellington and I delivered my speech and I did the interviews. And the votes were cast and tallied. At the end of the day, I was standing in front of the leaders of the organization who had gathered from all around the country with two extremely qualified rivals by my side, and the announcement was made. I was elected. Wow, this moment is etched so deeply into my memory as one of the most profound moments of my life. And yet, maybe I should have been looking to the future, because the next 10 months proved
to be the toughest of my life so far. Those 10 months were like the TV show Survivor, sat in an office nonstop for 10 months, and in the end, I didn't survive. I didn't complete those 12 months that I had been elected to serve as president. After just 6 months as president-elect and 4 months as president in action, I was forced out of the role by my team. And to the wonder of many people, I made a decision to stay on that team, reporting to a new leader for another 8 months to really stare my failure in the face. The 10 months leading up to that point were a little bit like that proverbial frog in that pot of water, getting heated up so slowly that he doesn't notice the temperature change. And in that story, the frog boiled to death, even though he could easily have jumped out. Well, figuratively, I boiled to death too. But in that death, I realized that I was not a frog. I realized that I was a phoenix waiting to be reborn. Not all at once, but slowly. Slowly, I began to build up a new me. I did what I was good at with a newfound humility that allowed me to connect more authentically. I facilitated teams. I coached individuals. I trained leadership skills, and I deconstructed my failure so that I could learn from it. And my failure was this, summed up by a mentor at the time. She said to me, "Josh, you lack emotional intelligence." I thought, all right, emotional intelligence, I know about that. That's like empathy. I've got this, it's fine. And she said, Josh, she said, "How are you feeling? How are you feeling right now?" And I said, I'm tired. I feel tired. And she looked me straight in the eyes and she said, "Josh, that's not an emotion." Wow, okay. What is an emotion? And I had thought that emotions got in the way of leadership and management, of science and business. I thought that I had successfully suppressed my emotions and rendered them harmless. Isn't that the goal of a scientific individual? I was wrong. My emotions were not the problem. In fact, I had cut off one of my leadership legs and found myself unable to walk. I had stunted a major part of my power. In fact, without emotions, I couldn't lead myself, let alone other people. But once I accepted this problem, I was able to overcome it. And I didn't realize how far I had come until earlier this year. In June, I flew to Mongolia to lead a team of facilitators delivering a leadership conference. And at the end of that conference, at the final debrief meeting with all the facilitators, we gave each other feedback. And the most common piece of feedback that I received was that I was extremely emotionally intelligent. In fact, one person said, "Josh, it seemed like you were able to know my emotions before I knew them myself." Wow. I was pretty flattered and also a little bit astounded. How did I go from turning my greatest weakness into a great strength so quickly? And I realized that the biggest shift for me was my belief. I used to believe that emotions got in the way of leadership and management. And now I believe that emotions are critical to leadership and management. We all know that the leader who gives a lot of positive reinforcement to his team gets much better results. And yet, we give praise too sparingly. I used to believe that emotions got in the way of decision making. And now I believe that emotions are an integral part of decision making. Without our emotions, we don't know how to value the different factors that make up a decision. And yet, we try to make decisions with the cold, hard facts alone, completely blind to the emotional work done in the background. The truth that has already dawned on all of us is that we are emotional beings first. It is our emotions that allow us to navigate so effortlessly in a complex world. It is our emotions that allow us to be leaders, and it is our emotions that make us human beings. So, at this point, I've talked for a while, and I want you talking as well. So, I want to ask you to do a little exercise, because what I found as a highly rational person, as a highly logical person, was that I could learn about emotions by just asking people. And we do this all the time, but we don't connect with people deeply enough. So I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you and ask them about how they're feeling in a moment, and dig deep. Find out how they're really doing today. Make assumptions. You seem to be doing this. And just really ask that question and ask insightfully. Before I do that, I'm going to teach you something called the Mexican shh. And it goes like this. I go shh, and then everyone around the room goes shh. And so we're going to practice that, all right? 3, 2, 1, shh. Okay, great. You can all do that at the same time. And that's how I'm going to get you to come back at the end, okay? So I'm going to give you 60 seconds now to turn to the person next to you and really have a deep conversation about your emotions. And the thing to remember about this is that we all know how to do this. We have the emotional a capacity within us to really connect. We just don't do it often enough. So let's just try and do it at a deep level right now. Here's your 60 seconds. Go. What's that? Fantastic, thank you. Who felt a little bit uncomfortable about sharing your emotions with someone you don't quite know that well? You know, I also, one more belief that I used to have was that emotions are a sign of weakness. And now I believe that emotions are the only way you can really connect with someone. So I hope you formed a new connection here today. And one final thing, as a hyperlogical person, I'm going to finish with a data point. And in fact, in 2009, the European Union did a report that found that 28% of people in the EU have health problems from work-related stress. 28%. And this problem is even worse in the US. In the USA, more than 70% of people have health problems from work-related stress. The EU found that this cost, they approximated that this cost 20 billion euros in 2009 alone, just in the EU 15. So my question is, how much of this value could we recapture just by being more aware of the emotions of our coworkers? It's like what Johan talked about earlier. Executives don't know how their colleagues are feeling. This is the problem. So I hope that I've been able to show you that emotional intelligence isn't just a good idea, it's critical. We need to bring more emotional intelligence into our own personal lives, but especially into science and in business, so that we can communicate more clearly, so that we can be better leaders, and maybe even so that we can be better human beings. Thank you.